Clark Kent grew not only out of my private life, but also out of Joe Schuster's. As a high school student, I thought that someday I might become a reporter, and I had crushes on several attractive girls who either didn't know I existed or didn't care. Gary Siegel. Pretty good choice, I guess.
Atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where you can't spell triumph without T-R-U-M-P. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. So glad to have you with us tonight. Coming up on the Worst People in the Whole Wide World Weekly Update, British cops start rounding up Jews for wearing Stars of David in public, and there wasn't even a German invasion. The governor of California gets very upset over a picture of a giant penis. The governor of Illinois continues to act like a giant penis, but first, what would happen if all the world's most evil, malevolent billionaire industrialists threw a nationwide No Kings protest and nobody showed up except geriatrics and furries? Well, we got the answer to that question yesterday when what was supposed to be a massive show of woke leftist force descended into a rather bizarre collection of scenes of 87-year-old unreconstructed liberal hippies posing for photos with dudes in giant inflatable lobster costumes. Because nothing says I fear for the future of American democracy like showing up for a protest in a giant inflatable lobster costume. And as for the old timers, I'm not sure what we should call them, but I've heard a few rather good suggestions, and I'm not sure whether my favorite one is Grantifa or Antifa. It's a tough call. Maybe we'll have to take a vote on that in the chat and decide the matter once and for all. As for the actual Antifa, they were conspicuous by their near total absence yesterday. Who knows? Maybe they used up all of their allowance money on those fun holidays in Portland and Chicago. President Donald Trump never one to pass up a perfectly good opportunity to mercilessly troll a group of people who are begging to be mercilessly trolled. Put up a delicious AI-generated video of himself wearing a crown flying an F-14 Tomcat with King Trump emblazoned on the fuselage as Danger Zone plays in the background, and he's dropping raw sewage all over the attendees at the No Kings protest, including the great-grandmother in the wheelchair who is in the middle of regaling the guy in the lobster costume with the story of how she banged 12 dudes in the mud pit at Woodstock. And that was just before Carlos Santana got done playing. Also, she may have eaten the brown acid. But at least she's not going back to the memory care facility empty-handed, because now she's got a t-shirt that says, I had a 48-hour pass from the nursing home, and all I got was a selfie with a guy in a lobster costume and this lousy t-shirt. Because nothing says we are on the right side of history and morality and democracy like half-dead geriatric women with walkers and young non-binary they-thems in sparkly rainbow unicorn costumes, awkwardly pretending they are just delighted to be spending a Saturday afternoon in each other's company. You know, the organizers of the No Kings protests said they wanted this to be an historic occasion whose effects would ring down through the ages. And in that sense, I think they might have achieved their purpose, because these memes are definitely going to live forever, as if we didn't already have enough memetic material to last for several lifetimes. But I guess our friends on the left, they are unusually generous that way. They're actually better at comedy than we tend to give them credit for. It's just that the comedy is unintentional, and they are always the unwitting butt of the joke. And speaking of butts, did you see the guy in the giant inflatable penis costume? Because our friends at the White House, in the Department of Memes and Mockery, they sure did. And they wasted no time tweeting out that picture with the caption, "Hey, look, Gavin Newsom showed up at the No Kings rally." And Gavin Newsom didn't seem to think that was very funny at all, which is strange since he has spent these last few months trying to restyle himself as some sort of internet comedy slay king. But I guess when he is the butt of the joke, or the giant penis of the joke, as the case may be, all of a sudden he transmogrifies into the woke male hair gel version of Queen Victoria, and it's all he can do to just grumble out, "We are not amused." Which seems kind of strange, because if the president of the United States thought of me when he saw a picture of a gigantic penis, I think I might be rather flattered. And speaking of big swinging dicks, the United States Marine Corps celebrated its 250th anniversary in Camp Pendleton yesterday. And as I was out front mowing the lawn, I got to watch several flights of Black Hawks passing overhead on their way from MCAS Miramar up to Pendleton, flying nice and low, probably 1,000, 1,500 feet, just low enough so that you don't just hear the sound of freedom, but it physically tickles you in your nether regions. But Gavin Newsom, again, was decidedly non-amused by all of it. In fact, he spent about a day and a half wailing and moaning on social media about how totally unacceptable it is that the Department of War ordered the I-5 freeway between San Onofre and Oceanside, the bit that passes directly through Camp Pendleton, to be shut down for a couple of hours yesterday, so the Marines, in commemoration of their 250th anniversary, in the presence of the Vice President of the United States, who is also a U.S. Marine, could do a big simulation of an amphibious invasion. Except no, that's actually not what happened at all, was it? It was Newsom who ordered the freeway shut down. He just tried to blame it on the War Department, but the War Department said, "Nah, that guy's lying. We never asked for any freeway shutdown." And they make a fair point, because if you drive on I-5 through Camp Pendleton on any day of the year, there's a significantly non-zero chance that you're going to see an amphibious training exercise in progress. Now, if Gavin Newsom was a smart man, or even a less stupid man, he would have just said nothing. Let's remember, after all, that the interstate highway system was built by the federal government for the express purpose of national defense, and the parts of it that run through military installations, the War Department, if they wanted to, could close them to private vehicular traffic at any time, for any reason, for any duration of their choosing. No state governor has any power to countermand a ruling like that. So when a governor does choose to complain about it, to whine and moan and grumble like a small child who doesn't wish to eat his vegetables, and especially when he lies out his ass about it and pretends it was the federal government that ordered the shutdown, when it was actually he himself that did it just because he wanted something to grandstand about, the only result he is going to achieve is to make himself look like a total douche. But if Gavin Newsom is good at anything, it is making himself look like a douche. And let's not pretend he would have any problem with any of this. If it was the exact same commemoration and they were doing the exact same simulated amphibious invasion, but Kamala Harris was the president and the display was being done in the presence of Vice President Tampon Tim Walz. And my God, one shudders to think how different that commemoration might look. Probably a lot more rainbow flags and double-handed jazz waving. But the point being, pound for pound, the U.S. Marine Corps is the most capable, most distinguished fighting force in the history of human armed conflict. They only get one 250th anniversary. And if a freeway needs to be shut down for 120 minutes to honor that anniversary, at the same installation where 100% of the men were trained who stormed the beaches of Peleliu and Kwajalein and Iwo Jima and Okinawa and 100 other Pacific islands, many thousands of whom paid the last full measure of devotion in the righteous cause of defeating Imperial Japan, then Gavin Newsom can shut his bitchy little mouth. And speaking of bitchy little mouths, J.B. Pritzker still has one of those, and when he's not shoving buckets of fried chicken into it, there are stupid, ignorant words coming out. JB is still very upset that federal agents are coming into his state and enforcing the immigration laws that were duly enacted by the Congress many decades, sometimes centuries ago. You know, if Democrats dislike our immigration laws so much, it seems like they've had ample opportunities during the periods when they have controlled the White House and the Congress to change those laws, but alas, they have never done that. JB now says he wants to prosecute individual ICE agents for unspecified violations of state and local laws. He doesn't go into any detail about what laws or what violations he is talking about, because of course he doesn't. But it's interesting to juxtapose this post that he's making this week with the fact that last week the Chicago PD were told to stand down when local terrorist criminals were attacking federal agents, including by shooting guns at them, which would seem to be violative of various state and local laws. So if I have this straight, you want to arrest and prosecute ICE agents for perceived violations of state and local law, but you refuse to arrest and prosecute other people who very clearly did violate state and local laws, just as long as ICE agents are the targets of said violation. And what a wonderfully clear and coherent moral and legal framework in which the governor of Illinois is operating. But at least he stopped short of telling Jews they are not allowed to enter the city, which means, you know what time it is now? Yep. We need to check in once again with our good friends across the pond in the Islamic Emirate of Britannistan, where not only was a man arrested and taken to jail last week for wearing a Star of David necklace too close to a pro-Hamas rally, you're inflaming community tensions, sir, and we just can't have that. But even more remarkably, even more shamefully, fans of the Israeli soccer club Maccabi Tel Aviv will be barred by the British government from attending their team's upcoming Europa League match at Aston Villa. You may have heard of Aston Villa, one of the oldest and proudest clubs in British soccer, or football as they call it over there. But you see, Aston Villa's home ground is located in the city of Birmingham. The population of the city of Birmingham, astoundingly, is now over 30% Muslim. So it's been decided that we just can't have any Jews coming into the city to watch their Israeli football team, because Birmingham is a Muslim city now, you see. And if any Jews show up to cheer for their football team, they will probably be lovingly killed by the Birmingham locals. And somewhere down in the seventh circle of hell, Mrs. Schicklgruber's little boy must be laughing his ass off right now, wondering why the British wasted so much energy and so many lives repelling the German invasion back in 1940, when a mere 85 years later, through the magical power of mass migration, they have achieved just the same sort of Britain that the German National Socialists would have sought to institute had they managed to stage a successful cross-channel invasion during the Second World War. A Britain where Jews are bundled into police vans for the dastardly offense of being too Jewish in public. A Britain where the largest city in the West Midlands has to be closed off from Jews entering it because the government can't guarantee they won't be massacred, culturally enriched by the Birmingham locals. And it only took a mere 100 years for Birmingham to get from Peaky Blinders to whatever you call this. Because nothing says we are a tolerant, progressive, multicultural wonderland like your government being so unable to ensure the safety of visiting sports fans that you have to announce you're not even going to bother trying. And so the question would seem to be begged. Why play the game in Birmingham at all? Why not move the damn thing to a neutral site? If you can't guarantee the safety of Maccabees fans, how can you guarantee the safety of their players and their coaches? All the woke progressive messaging in British football over the last 20, 25 years, all the rainbow shoelaces, all the slogans printed on the fields about kick out racism, all the public service announcements played on the stadium big screen with players wagging their fingers and reading out scripts about how we don't tolerate hatred and bigotry in British football, just to wind up with the home ground of one of your country's most prominent teams having to be declared a Jew-free zone? That's where we are now? So what then was the point of all that posturing about tolerance and diversity? Was it all just a big, meaningless load of puffed up virtue signaling bullshit? It would seem that yes, it was. And with that, my work here is done. That's all I've got. This has been the WPWWWU for the 19th of October, 2025. I now transmit you into the stern but loving embrace of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we are going to discuss one of the most evil perpetrations of racist studies ever perpetrated on the American people, We're going to discuss all things movie Superman and probably run afoul of all sorts of random things here and there. We're definitely going to transgress. We might even progress. You never know. I've got a Mr. Reagan video we're going to review. But before we get to any of that, I want to know, dude. Oh, no, wrong button. Do the thing. There we go. Are you still glitchy?
I don't
Do
know, am I
this.
glitchy?
Yeah. Drop out and come back in. And
Okay.
that should deal with that.
Make
I
me
don't know
go.
what's going on over there. We'll do that thing, this thing. All right, so I've shown a few Mr. Reagan videos on the channel. Huge fan of his. He can't tell a joke to save his life, but he does have read it. You want me to read it 3 more times? Are you gonna pay me? Pay me, and I'll read it 3 more times. No problem. But he does have a pretty good grip on certain aspects of the culture war and the whole political sphere, and I'm going to take full advantage of that on this one particular point. So, several years ago, late 70s, early 80s, there was this relatively famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, a study that was done by some West Coast institute that determined that children shown pictures of babies identified dark babies as less desirable than light colored babies. And well, quite frankly, I think that was all bullshit. I think you're good, bro.
Am I good?
I think so. Yeah, you sound good. You look good. You rock out. Do you remember this particular study?
I vaguely, but I'll need the video to refresh me.
All right. So he's going to go through it. He's going to explain it, and then he's going to try to sell you something. We might skip that part, but it's only 11 minutes, and we can, red ball right through it.
Before we get into it, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my other channel, Strange Tales. I've got a new fantastic episode coming soon, so stay tuned for that. And make sure you hit the notification bell. Very important. Link is in the description below. So here's something that's going to piss you off. A few years back, a research study went super viral claiming that white doctors were killing black babies. Ever since then, that study has been used to justify racist hiring practices in hospitals across America. And of course, it has been used to support the leftist narrative about systemic racism. Well, it turns out that it was all a massive lie. The original 2020 study claimed that black newborns cared for by black physicians experienced a 50% reduction in mortality compared to those who were cared for by white physicians. The media ran wild with headlines like, "White doctors are killing black babies." Nearly 800 academic papers have cited this study. Medical schools have redesigned their curricula around it, and hospitals have even changed their hiring practices. But here's what really happened. Turns out that white doctors were disproportionately delivering black babies who were underweight, and black doctors were disproportionately delivering black babies of a healthy weight. Why? Well, because high-risk pregnancies get funneled to specialized NICUs in large hospitals where the best-trained, highest-qualified physicians work, and those physicians are almost all white. The study failed to control for...
Hold up. Did you see the look on his face?
Yep.
This is the actual look.
And those physicians are almost all white.
That is the look of white guilt. That is the defining... I mean,
and yeah, I do remember the study we're talking about now, and it goes back to that whole mistaken notion that we've talked about before, that if you can identify any kind of race-based disparity in the statistics about anything, then the only possible explanation for it is insidious white racism.
Right? Obviously.
And the entire leftist worldview, amazingly, is actually built around notions like that, which is what makes it complete and total madness.
I need to unpause this. He's starting to give me Sloth from Ice Age vibes. That's so fucked up.
The study failed to control for very low birth weight, under 1,500 grams, which is the most important risk factor for infant mortality. When other researchers finally got access to the data in 2024 and properly adjusted for this variable, the supposed benefit for Black newborns with Black physicians, it totally vanished. Statistically insignificant. Zero. Nothing. But this lie gets even more sinister, because this wasn't just a case of incompetence or junk science. This was intentional fraud. I will get to that in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something.
Are we going to try to sell something?
I believe we're going to try and sell something.
Okay, I'm down.
A lot of people drink way too much in college, and a lot of people carry these habits over into their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even beyond. And a lot of people hit the party scene and they try drugs. Maybe you're on painkillers, antidepressants, maybe something else. All these things can destroy your liver over time. I personally take medication daily for an inherited chronic illness, and I'm sure many of you can relate. And this is why Purge is offering their new liver cleanse products.
I'm sorry.
Tells you a little something about who his audience is.
For anyone who needs to clear those toxins out once and for all. PurgeStore.com offers everything you need to cleanse and detox your body. Powerful enzymes and probiotics, 15-day colon cleanse protocols, a parasite cleanse, and of course,
drinking on the air during the liver cleanse commercial.
Log in as a promo code and get 15% off. If you are worried about the health of your liver, check out PurgeStore.com today. The link is in the description below. So you might be...
All right, hold on. We have to discuss Purge a little more, because that sounds painful, invasive, and problematic. I might rather keep my parasites. You don't know.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of a it's not the most pleasant sounding brand name I've ever heard in my life.
Right. I mean, I just don't feel like going to Purge. You know, I kind of feel like there might be some yeah.
Because normally when I hear the word purge, I picture a high school girl vomiting in the bathroom after lunch.
Yeah, no. My grandmother used the word purge to refer to any vomiting anytime. So anytime I hear the word purge, that's the thought that pops into my head.
Well, yeah, that's what I associate with it too, and I can't imagine we're the only ones.
Right.
Conclusion of systemic racism in this study as an honest mistake. The researchers, they just didn't think to check the data on the ratio of underweight Black babies being delivered by white doctors versus Black doctors. Okay, I mean, sure, it's the most important risk factor for infant mortality, but okay, maybe these researchers just somehow missed that whilst conducting their study. It seems impossible, but sure, let's be generous and pretend that this might have happened. But that's not what happened. This was intentional. And we know it was intentional because it turns out that there's another bit of data that the researchers themselves uncovered, data that was conveniently left out of their work. Actually, let me rephrase that. The researchers deliberately hid this data. An organization called Do No Harm actually submitted a Freedom of Information Act request about this study. And they revealed that the researchers' own data showed that Black doctors have the exact same problem with white babies. Harvard economist Brad Greenwood and the team who conducted this.
Oh, wait.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
But I'm guessing we're not chalking that one up to evil Black racist doctors, are we?
No, see there, but that's, I see the white guilt now. I know why that look was on his face when he said it, because here's the thing, because of the previous statement about how most of those doctors that deal with problem patients are white doctors. Those problem patients don't go to the Black doctors that are having these problems, right?
Never mind the fact that you can take any statistical data set and make it say any political thing you want it to say if you massage it hard enough in the right way. And that's just a fact about the world. We know that. If you want to make the argument that all white doctors are horrible racists, then you can parse the data in such a way that the numbers will make that argument for you, even though it's utter nonsense. But there's an entire industry that has been built up around massaging statistics to not just statistics, but also poll numbers to make them say the exact thing you want to say. And it's one of the most parasitic political industries that has begun existing in this century.
The one that drives me crazy are those custom pollsters, the ones that phrase the question in such a way so that there's only
Yes.
one rational answer.
Yep.
And even though you don't agree with it, it's phrased in a way that makes you almost requires you answer it to a positive or a negative.
And all poll results are a function of how you phrase the question. 100% of them.
The ones I hate are the ones who start with, because so-and-so has done such and such.
Yes.
Right. And then it goes on to a question.
You start off with a series of flawed, incorrect assumptions and predicate the question on that. And your data are already garbage at that point and completely useless. But don't let that stop you.
Yeah, don't let that stop you.
This original study actually had data showing white newborns face 80 more deaths per 100,000 births with a black physician than a white one. A 22% fatality drop from racial concordance. But these researchers cut that data from their paper. Why? Well, because showing both races do better with doctors of their own race would destroy their anti-white propaganda campaign. But when you think about this, with the added context of the underweight versus healthy weight infant data factored in, things get particularly grim. The data indicates that white doctors were losing more black babies because white doctors are more often specialists delivering underweight black babies, whereas black doctors are losing more white babies, and there's no actual explanation. So what we can conclude from this, if we want to do a little left-wing activist style speculating, is that white doctors are not racist, but black doctors are. Is that what's really...
Or might be. I mean...
Gasp!
Gasp. I'm just saying, you know, there may be a perfectly rational explanation for how this data presents. It is possible that the interpretation presented here is in error. But the very second he said that there was a disparity in the other direction, I realized the implications of that statement. Like, whoa, because that would imply that some doctors aren't as thorough as perhaps they should be.
It would imply that, wouldn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Oh no. Now what?
Well, and so much of this just speaks to the futility of living in a world where all of the political paradigms and narratives are built around the idea that any sort of statistical disparity, whether real or imagined, is automatically attributable to evil white racism. And
But
so much
now,
of
sir-
so much of the left's worldview currently is predicated upon things like that, and that probably has much to do with why the Democrat Party has the lowest approval ratings ever recorded for any party since the advent of modern polling.
Now, sir, I have it on good authority from the mainstream media that it is evil white racism.
And who am I to argue with the mainstream media?
Okay, we'll just see. Maybe. I don't know.
They are, after all, the professional journalismers.
Journalismers.
If we want to indulge in left-wing logic, it's absolutely what's going on. But listen, this pattern of manufacturing fake racism studies is everywhere in academia. There is a famous study from 2004 called the Bertrand Mullane-Nathan Resume Study. Researchers sent out resumes to HR departments across the country. Some resumes had black-sounding names and some had white-sounding names. The resumes with white-sounding names got significantly more calls for interviews in spite of their qualifications being identical. 10% callbacks for white applicants and 6.5% callbacks for black applicants. And similar studies have been done for rental inquiries. And this study has been cited countless times as evidence of systemic racism. But the truth is that the researchers have no idea why these so-called white names were more desirable to employers. The truth is that the divide was probably based on perceptions of class, not race. Identifiable black names are essentially low-class ghetto names. LaQuisha and Darnell are not names one typically associates with Ivy League graduates. Preston or Sloan, much more likely. But here's the reason that this study is absolute junk science. Total propaganda. It's because they didn't include a third category, poor white redneck name. No resumes were sent out with names like Cletus or Rusty. I can guarantee that if they had done this,
Billy Joe.
Imagine your doctor's name is Rusty Banks. All right, Claire Cletus, I want you to hand me that stick. I'm going to run to this. If I can find it, no, like, I don't know.
Jim Bob Dupree didn't get a call back. God darn it. But do you know what counterpoint this makes me think of? You remember the Des Moines, Iowa school superintendent who turned out to be an illegal alien from somewhere in Africa? And nobody in the district ever bothered doing a full background check on this guy. They were the liberal white women on that school board were swooning so hard over his luxurious dreadlocks and his dark skin and his exotic accent and his African sounding name that they had visions of high ESG scores dancing in their head, and they said, hire this man immediately and put him in close proximity with the children in our school district. And that's what actually happens in many of these cases, because let's not pretend it isn't.
I don't believe that. I believe someone knew, people were aware, they just didn't say nothing. I think it's much worse than it appears on its surface that, oh, we just failed to do our due diligence. No, sir, I don't believe that for a second. Have you ever been inside of a bureaucratic process?
It's true. It might be even worse than I'm giving it credit for. But I can still picture white liberal women swooning so hard over a guy with an exotic foreign accent and an African sounding name and luxurious dreadlocks applying for the school district superintendent position that they just say, stop doing that background search work. We want to hire this guy immediately, because how woke will we look if we hire this guy to be our superintendent? And they did, and he wound up being not just an illegal alien, but an illegal alien with a track record of some fairly significant felonious behavior in his background. And that's Des Moines, goddamn Iowa, is where that's happening now.
Yep.
Would have found that those resumes would also get about 6.5% callbacks. In fact, I'd imagine it would be far fewer, because there would be no counterbalance from the influence of DEI. Or take Roland Fryer's 2016 study. Even though this Harvard economist found no increase in killings of black men by police, which has actually caused massive backlash from the left, even credible threats of violence, Fryer also claimed that cops use force more often against black suspects. This, he concluded, was a product of systemic racism in policing. However, now that police body cams are everywhere, we know that this conclusion is false. Why? Because we now see that black suspects tend to be far more belligerent, far more likely to resist arrest, and far more likely to attack police officers. Use of force against black suspects is not a sign of systemic racism. It's necessary. So you see, this is a serious problem in academia. Study after study is
That's a fucking shit, dude. Like, holy damn.
Can't we just call it Blackademia? Let's call it Blackademia.
Oh, yes, sir. Blackademia has just occurred. That is a thing now.
It's just like Smarmalade. It just flows too nicely.
It is now part of the lexicon. We are definitely including Blackademia. You heard it here first.
Blackademia.
Now I think.
Rigged in order to perpetuate the leftist worldview that absolutely saturates academia. Many of these race-oriented studies fraudulently perpetuate the same insidious message. White people are bad, black people are good. But let's get back to the fraudulent paper about white doctors. Libs of TikTok exposed that the American Medical Association has medical students complete a racism in medicine module, which teaches about white supremacy, white privilege, and blames white people for developing the concept of race to justify.
I got a question. And all right, I need to talk to you like in private for a second, because look, I don't want anybody else knowing about this. You reckon any of these leftist journalists have ever done any deep dives into the white supremacy movement of America? You reckon any of them's ever gone undercover?
I suspect not, because if they did, they would probably discover that every member of every white supremacist group in the United States is an undercover FBI agent.
You're probably right. Oh my God. Well, why do I have to believe that? God, they're NSA training ops. Damn it. Oh God! Somehow I knew that was true, dude. I didn't even think.
Oh, you know perfectly well it's true.
I knew it was true. I was just thinking. I mean, you know, they say there's so much of this stuff. There has to be some of it in existence out there somewhere, right?
But the only time we ever hear about it is from woke leftists, which is a strange thing.
When we
they tell us it exists, but we never see any actual evidence of it in the real world. So it's a strange sort of incongruity.
Well, also the only other time you see it is when it's 5 FBI agents and one retarded guy trying to plot something.
Right. Which is often what it amounts to. Like with the Gretchen Whitmer thing. That's what you're talking about, right? The Gretchen Whitmer thing.
Exactly what I'm talking about. But that's not the only time things like that have happened. It's oddly irregular.
No, it's par for the course, if anything.
Slavery. Unbelievable. The Association of American Medical Colleges now requires medical students to achieve competencies in white privilege, anti-colonialism, and race as a social construct. This is not education, folks. This is indoctrination. Ben Shapiro exposed how the American College of Surgeons literally gives out awards based on race. The ACS invited Madeline B. Torres to explain that when patients see physicians who look like them, they tend to do better. Grants and awards are also being distributed to surgeons on the basis of minority status. Now, it took 4 years to debunk this racist white doctors study. 4 years of discrimination, 4 years of anti-white propaganda. Seems like a long time to debunk a study, given the fact that it is obviously wrong. So why then did it take so long to discredit? Well, in the toxic world of radical left academia, undoubtedly researchers were terrified of being called racist for questioning it. When The Economist finally acknowledged this debunking, they claimed that believing the fraud was, quote, understandable. But it's not understandable. The assumption of racist motivations and intentions of white people has been discredited so many times and so often debunked as intentional fraud that there is no longer any excuse for accepting these kinds of provocative claims without a healthy dose of skepticism. The only people that believe these things unquestioningly these days are those who want to believe them. And a rational skepticism is absolutely critical because these lies have real-world consequences. Wake Forest Medical School is graduating a student who bragged about injuring a conservative patient. A Duke surgeon has admitted to abandoning all sorts of metrics to hire more non-white surgeons. Northwestern Medicine.
That's not good.
But like all industries, the race huckstering industry requires a constant, steady supply of raw material. And the raw material that industry requires is fake racism. And they manufacture fake racism wherever they can get it, including from dumbass, warped, skewed, dishonest studies just like the ones that we're discussing here.
Absolutely.
Job applications now include LGBTQ questionnaires where you must declare if you are a, quote, ally. The Daily Caller found that this debunked study had been cited over 500 times simply to justify discriminatory hiring. But of course, the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, or PNAS, still refuses to retract the paper. They're letting the lie continue because it serves their agenda.
PNAS? Really?
God, imagine that. Race hucksters letting a lie continue because it serves their agenda. That would never happen.
No.
That's not how fucking Al Sharpton has built his entire career. Nobody would ever do that.
And he's got a few proteges in the wings over there. Mr. Cory Booker seems to be playing a very similar tune.
Jazzy Crockett also definitely a Sharpton protege.
Angie. Bruh.
Academia wants evidence of systemic racism so badly, they will literally make it up. So next time you hear about a study claiming to prove racism, remember this. There is a pretty good chance it's complete nonsense. They're not doing science. They are manufacturing propaganda to justify their hatred of white people and they wonder why we don't trust the experts anymore.
All right. So, in general, how does this make you feel?
The same way I felt before.
Oh, good.
Just as distrustful of professional race hucksters and the race huckstering industry in general, because we know it is built on a house made of lies, just as it always has been.
Right. No, I totally agree.
Well, we know that if one of these studies produced a conclusion that was not concordant with something that was convenient to the narrative they seek to advance, they would never publicly mention that study ever. It is, we only manufacture things that comport with our message and will make us more money. And that's the way the entire fake racism industry works.
Okay, the other clip that I have is a bit from Crowder at the barbershop, I believe. And I think it's like part 2 or 3 or something, but we'll get to that towards the end if we have time. I will now accept your dissertation on the life of Superman, sir.
I really liked this comment that Ardent Party put up. Let me find it so I can put it on the screen, because there it is. This is kind of what I was going to make my jumping off point in the Superman discussion, because when I watched the new 2025 Superman movie, and I waited to watch it until my son and daughter-in-law were present so that I would have a sort of younger counterpoint to check my reactions, to make sure I wasn't just being a cranky old dad. But the moment when I concluded, and it was pretty early on in the movie, that James Gunn doesn't get Superman, and he doesn't have any intention of trying to make a movie here that is faithful to the whole idea of Superman, was when Jonathan and Martha Kent were portrayed as idiot bumpkin rednecks, just for the sake of a couple of cheap gags, because they don't understand how smartphones work. And like I mentioned to you backstage before the show, I don't know when people from Kansas started talking like they're from the goddamn Alabama panhandle, but apparently they do. And that's just how much contempt that Hollywood filmmakers actually have for people in the American heartland. But setting that aside, Superman is not a character who you can just stick into any time period and any cultural context and have it work just as well. You can do that with a Batman or a Spider-Man, but you can't really separate Superman with the context out of which he arose. And the context out of which Superman arose is that Superman is an American Jesus myth. And it's just a bit of fun irony that it's a Jesus myth that was dreamed up by a couple of Jewish kids from Cleveland, one of whom was originally from freaking Canada. But the point of it is, it's a Jesus myth that also celebrates the values of the American heartland as they were perceived to exist around the turn of the 20th century. And it's the same nostalgic vision of the American heartland that Walt Disney was celebrating when he built Disneyland, because you can't go anywhere else in Disneyland without walking through Main Street, USA. And he built Main Street, USA to be an evocation of the town in which he grew up around the turn of the 20th century, Marceline, Missouri. But the Jesus metaphor in Superman goes deeper than that, because it goes to his parents too. Because Jor-El, his Kryptonian father, that's the Heavenly Father creator deity. And then he crashes down on Earth in the middle of the American heartland, and Jonathan and Martha Kent are the Joseph and Mary of the story. They are his earthly custodians who are tasked with raising him up and giving him a decent set of values, because Heavenly Father can't do all that by himself. And you can't really make a good Superman movie that either glosses over or ignores entirely the fact that Superman is an American Jesus myth. James Gunn either doesn't understand that or just wants to ignore it completely. Zack Snyder, on the other hand, he did understand the fact that Superman is an American Jesus myth, but since Zack Snyder as a filmmaker is congenitally incapable of any sort of subtlety of any kind, which I think is typified by the fact that in the Batman versus Superman movie, Batman actually hits Superman over the head with a fucking kitchen sink. That's Zack Snyder's filmmaking ethos, boiled down to a single image. But he leaned so absurdly hard into the Jesus metaphor that it wound up insulting the intelligence of the audience. Where the last time he talks with Jor-El on the spaceship and then floats out to go save, he does literally a 10-second long Jesus crucifixion pose, and this is after, in the first part of the second act, where Zack Snyder hits us over the head with the Jesus metaphor so hard that he actually has Clark Kent go into a church and poses him next to an actual picture of Jesus, as if he's saying, see, this is a Jesus metaphor, guys. Do you understand now? Which is, it's just way too over the top. There have been, I believe, 9 Superman movies since the 1978 picture, and only 2 of them I would describe as good movies. The first, the 1978 picture, although it definitely does have problems, I wouldn't describe Superman 2, even though it does have some good things going for it. I wouldn't describe it as a good movie simply because of all the production difficulties and the change of director and everything that wound up making it such a sometimes absurd tonal mismatch from one scene and often one shot to the next. I think the only other Superman story movie between now and then that I would call a good movie, and some people will laugh at me for this, but it's Superman Returns from 2006, the movie that Bryan Singer made, which was intended as a direct sequel to the first 2 Superman movies from 78 and 80. Do I think it's a great picture? No, but it's better than Man of Steel. It's better than Batman versus Superman. It's a hell of a lot better than this brand new picture that came out this year. I don't know who this picture is for. I don't know what this picture is trying to be. It's kind of the same reaction I had when we talked about Thunderbolts the other week, that if you held a gun to my head and asked me to give you a 30-second synopsis of the plot of this film, I don't think I could do it.
I can't do it right now.
It is just a succession of big set piece action scenes, and stuff happens in between. And it almost doesn't even matter what the stuff is. Plot elements are introduced and then discarded almost just as quickly. I couldn't really tell you what the story is. It just seems designed only to set up a sequel, which also was the original intended thrust of the 1978 movie, because if you remember, Superman and Superman 2 were shot concurrently with each other, and they were about 3/4 of the way done with both of them before Richard Donner started falling out with the producer whose name escapes me at the moment. But the guy who was the intermediary between him and the Salkind brothers, the executive producers, and they decided, this is getting so bad, let's just stop work on the second movie and we'll finish the first movie so that we're sure that we have something to release by the hard release date that we are committed to. And one of the first results of that was they took what was supposed to be the ending of the second movie, and they shifted it to the first movie. The bit where the bit that just really wrecks a lot of the mythos, where he, flies around the planet so fast that it spins backward and time reverses, and he brings Lois Lane back to life because she just died because he stopped the one missile and not the other missile. But originally, the end of the first movie was supposed to be a cliffhanger for the second movie. The end of the first movie was supposed to be when General Zod and his compatriots escape from the Phantom Zone and arrive on Earth, and then that would have been the first cliffhanger in cinematic history, really. And of course, it ruined a lot of the second movie, which might have been ruined anyway, because Donner said, I'm not coming back to finish the second movie if this producer is still on board, because I'm not going to work with that dude. So best of luck to you. So then they bring in Richard Lester, who's a British comedy director. He's primarily known at that point for directing A Hard Day's Night. And I guess the Salkind brothers must have had their own vision of what they wanted these movies to be, because they had him shoot a lot of really ridiculous slapstick comedy type stuff, which you see a lot of in the New York battle sequence between General Zod and his henchmen and hench lady and Superman, where and some product placement too, quite a bit of product placement. They have him throw the villain through a Marlboro truck 2 or 3 times and then throw him into a Coca-Cola sign, which, that's all very subtle. But and I'm not even sure how the second movie was supposed to finish originally, but they finished it in a really stupid way, as it turns out, because of course Superman kisses Lois Lane, and then somehow he has memory wiping abilities now, which is never one of his established powers in any of the comics. But I guess we needed to do that to set up the god awful third and fourth movies. And you know what else? I don't know how long it's been since I've watched the 1978 Superman, but when you're a little kid and you're watching these things, you really don't realize certain things that you realize when you watch them again as an adult. And specifically, I'm talking about how bad Lois Lane wants to bang Superman. Like from the when he first shows up on her back porch to do his little interview that they're going to do, and she lights a cigarette, and he says, "Oh, you really shouldn't smoke, Miss Lane." And she says, "Well, lung cancer, right?" And he says, and he uses his X-ray vision to scan her lungs, and he says, "Oh, not yet." And then the next question she asks him is, "Well, if you can see through things, what color underwear am I wearing?" Like, wow, Lois, you are really
Right?
leading. You are really leading vagina first here, aren't you?
He really does.
You
And
really get a sense
Lane-
of the fact when you watch these things as an adult that, my God, she wants to bang Superman so bad, and then
Lana Lane is even worse, bro.
and even more so in the second movie when they invent an excuse for the two of them to go to this Niagara Falls newlywed hotel where the bedposts are lava lamps, which might be my favorite thing in all of cinema history, that the bedposts were lava lamps. I mean, what can you even say about that? It is the greatest thing ever. But that of course is the scene where he goes to great pains to she is suspecting that he is Superman, and she jumps into Niagara Falls, and she's going to go over the edge because she figures now he's going to have to turn into Superman and save me. But he goes to incredible lengths to stay in his Clark Kent identity, but save her anyway, and throws a branch into the river, and she is saved. And so she temporarily starts thinking that, okay, maybe Clark Kent and Superman are different people. But then afterward, when they are back in the little honeymoon suite, he dips his hand into the fire and doesn't get burned. And then the jig is up, and she says, "Oh wow, you really are Superman." And then right in that little moment of that little scene, Christopher Reeve really demonstrates that he is a far better actor than movies like this ever deserve, because he, just in the act of turning around and taking his glasses off, he does an actual physical and vocal transformation from Clark Kent into Superman. And I don't even know how to describe what a great bit of acting that is. Like he pulls it off so well.
I've always thought that he was imitating Chevy Chase when he was doing his Clark Kent act.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, and with the little tick he had of pushing his glasses up on his nose, and the voice was completely different too. It was really kind of astounding the extent to which he was able to make these different characters. I mean, obviously, it still doesn't get across the uncanny valley of how could anybody not realize. And then, of course, Lois Lane, after we've gotten the whole secret identity thing out of the way, and then she's got this look on her face like, okay, can we please bang now? Seriously, can we please bang? And he says, okay, you want to go to my place? And she's like, oh my God, yes, it's about freaking time. And then he takes her to the Fortress of Solitude, but they can't bang yet because he's got to depower himself. Because as we know from Chasing Amy, if they bang when he's still got his Superman powers and he ejaculates, it's going to be like a shotgun blast right through her back, and she's going to be dead, and that's going to blow the entire sex scene. So he has to go in the no powers chamber and depower himself, and then they go and have a nice little bang in the bed that's made out of like fire blankets, reflective aluminum fire blankets, which I'm sure is a really comfortable place to have sex, but
Super comfortable.
Yes.
I want to drill down on the 2025 Superman and a lot of the issues. First of all, the actor was actually fairly stupendous. I really liked his portrayal of Superman and the way he rolled with it. There's a few things lost and missing, but I don't blame the actor for these things. After all, when you open with your main character having already had his ass whipped, which would have been a much better movie than the one we actually watched, you kind of have to go ahead and just give up on certain points. That being said, I liked the actor. The actor did an excellent job, in my opinion. Given what he was working with, I don't think he could have been a better Superman.
What did you think of the female lead?
I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
One of the issues I had with this Superman is a complete loss of the reason Superman is the way he is. You pointed out the Jesus myth, but it goes a lot deeper than that when it comes down to, people who aren't so invested in the Christian ethos. There's more. He was the kid down the road, raised by his grandparents in the middle of a cornfield, freaking Kansas or Iowa or Joe Blowtown, USA. He's that slightly awkward kid nobody could ever quite, get along with for whatever reason. He just seems so superior. And at the same time, he's a really nice kid, right? He never bullies anyone. He never does the things you expect children to do, and is, by every account of him as a child, was quite a restrained figure. I mean, when you can just rip people's heads off, you should probably practice restraint. Along with that comes the apple pie and the summer jamboree and catching fireflies and all of the other things, fishing in creeks, all of those imaginary things that all of these kids would have done. The 4th of July and all of that stuff, baseball. He had a pennant on his freaking wall in his bedroom growing up, and it changed every couple of years with his favorite team, and all of that stuff is just completely unsaid because the ethos of Superman carries it. You don't need to mention that. But in this version of Superman, he wasn't sent here to raise up the species, to improve the world, to do the best that he could do, which seems to have been the theme up to this point in the mythos of Superman.
Yep.
He was sent here to put together a harem of women to create Kryptonian children and breed humans utilize humans as breeding stock for the Kryptonian empire that will come.
And that was one of the things that made me just facepalm and say, James Gunn, what the hell are you trying to do here?
It was obvious what he's trying to do. He is trying to subvert the ethos of Superman into the state religion that he personally believes in. He's trying to subvert the American Jesus mythos and the Ubermensch, the whole concept of a superior being in association with being an artificer of the state itself. That was my take on it. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and that's an outstanding way of putting it. And that story element really bothered me. And aside from which, I kind of thought when they introduced that it was going to wind up being a fraudulent translation that Lex Luthor did, and they were going to undo it later on in the movie, but they never did. And I was kind of astounded by that. They just left it.
when I heard it, when I first heard it, and me and my wife were sitting there watching it, and we're those assholes that pause a movie while we're going through when something big happens, and we look at each other and go, "So how you reckon that's going to play out?" And we make a pitch at what we think's going to happen, and we unpause it and watch the movie. Everyone hates us. Don't bother telling me. I'm aware, but
No, but doing that is so much less annoying than having that conversation while the movie is still playing. Pausing
Right.
the movie and having that conversation is the polite thing to do.
Right. So we pause, we discuss it, and it was both of us pretty much assumed that's going to get walked back as an artificial AI thing, and they couldn't do anything with the damaged part of it, and there's really nothing to it. And right before I unpaused, I looked there, I was like, you know what? I've seen some of James Gunn's work, and I don't think he's going to walk it back. I think that was the point in putting that message in there, was to simply writ large the theme of the rest of this movie, which is, even if you are the superior white guy, there's some brown person out there that's going to be able to whoop your ass. And he demonstrates it over and over and over again by having the nanotech chick like almost suffocate him, which is funny because Superman flies around in space.
Right.
Like, what? You're what? Sorry, I don't think that doesn't follow. Has the robot.
I also thought Superman having robot sidekicks was weird, and I was going to ask you if there's any comic book basis for that, or if that's just a thing that James Gunn invented out of whole cloth.
I think there might be, but I think it was a parallel dimensional Superman that had a bunch of robot sidekicks, and I don't know anything about them, but I vaguely remember there being some type of automation going on in the Fortress of Solitude while he's not there. Now, I don't think they were Ultron fucking robots like those were. I mean, that was straight out of a Tony Stark film.
But he does have a team of chimpanzees in a pocket universe being internet trolls, trying to make things trend on Twitter, which is probably more closer to reality than we would like it to be.
I actually loved that scene because I just pictured a couple of Indian server farms over there. It's actually
I mean you're not too far off.
I mean, it's amazingly apt. I believe. I don't believe that one's too far. In fact, there's a double head full of things. Like, for instance, Lex Luthor in this version of Superman universe doesn't want to kill people. Instead, he just locks them away at a gulag that nobody knows about. I think that is probably one of the most telling parts about this whole film.
Yeah, James Gunn has gotten the memo from the last batch of Marvel product that you can use this alternate pocket universe thing to get yourself out of all kinds of narrative corners that you've painted yourself into. And he really leans into that pretty hard.
I mean, it has so many problems with it. Like, how do you feed those people? Half of those guys in those cages are super altered humans of some stripe or another. And you're just going to stack them in a box on top of each other. I mean, a bunch of them are really bad guys and wouldn't work together if you let them out. But at the same time, it's silly to think they wouldn't work together to get out.
And we're reconstituting the Justice League, but we're calling it the Justice Gang. And didn't we just have a Justice League movie like 6 freaking years ago?
No, that's not correct. The Justice Gang was already a thing, and it wasn't the Justice League because it was led by the Green Lantern, the slapsticky asshole that was like a South California surfer guy, and he was completely uneducated and completely unfit for the role, except for the fact that he experiences a condition called true belief. And it's the reason why his Green Lantern powers are actually superior to those of other people. And instead of using like super technical bullshit and being super educated, he read a bunch of comic books when he was a kid. So that's his Green Lantern powers, is to whip out a big ass giant fist and wallop your ass upside the head with it.
So you know what I thought the most interesting thing was when I was reading about the two actors that they cast as Superman, Clark Kent, and Lois Lane, respectively, was that they both only got paid $750,000, which kind of almost sounds to me like a hedging of bets, like we want to keep the costs down in case this thing doesn't do quite as well as we want it to do. I mean, I didn't mind the I can't even remember his name, but I didn't mind the Superman guy. He seems almost kind of like nondescript, like a blank slate, like almost like a guy you would see in a Superman video game. The girl, on the other hand, Rachel Brosnahan, I believe is her name. I haven't seen her in anything else, but she strongly the actress she reminds me of changes, whether she's in a close up or a mid range shot. When she's in a mid range shot, she looks like the bastard love child of Demi Moore and Ellen Page, and she has Demi Moore's exact voice. When you put her in close up, I get really crazy strong Maggie Gyllenhaal vibes from her, and I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Well, one consideration for any casting choice for Lois Lane is she's supposed to be girl next door hot, not supermodel hot.
Right.
And Lana Lang is supposed to be like ex model hot. Like she could have been a model, but she chose to be a journalist. And everybody thinks she's stupid for doing it. And they're both differently intelligent, but equally motivated. And it's a hard nut to sell when you've got Superman in the middle, but it's not Superman, it's Clark Kent, right? Because they can't say that, oh, well, they fell in love with Superman. Neither one of them can say this because that's not actually what happens. What actually happens, they fall in love with the Clark Kent and cheat on him with Superman. And with Lana Lang, Superman lets that whole thing go down. Like he lets it happen. He doesn't tell her that he's Clark Kent. She doesn't find out until after Superman's banged her a few times. And it's never brought up as an issue in the relationship at all. But keep in mind, these timelines run concurrently, which means that ultimately, during the time period when Lois Lane and Clark Kent are an item and Lana Lang and Superman are banging, that's Superman cheating on Lois.
But I will say, however, that this casting of Lois Lane was significantly better than the last two castings of Lois Lane because, first of all, Amy Adams, totally not Lois Lane at all. And Kate Bosworth in Superman Returns, just as bad, but at least she had the right hair color, but still totally not Lois Lane. You're still. I know that Margot Kidder had a lot of imperfections, but and I know that we are in a feminist female empowerment epoch now, but you can't abandon the fact that Lois Lane wants to bang Superman. And
That's true.
that's one of the most enjoyable, engaging things about the first two movies from 78 and 80 or whatever year the second film was. But it's one of the things that makes the movies fun. And the movies since then have not been fun because they are completely unwilling to depict a female character as wanting to get in the pants of a male character. And that's stupid. And it does a disservice to the story. Because you know what? Sometimes a woman does want to get in a man's pants, and that's just the way the world works. And the world continues to spin. And what do you do?
Well, furthermore, we're not talking about just some random kid. Clark Kent might be just the dopiest dude you ever met with a bad eyesight and bad coordination and a Chevy Chase sense of humor. Or he's Superman, but he's always Superman. Clark Kent is the alternate identity. It is the mask that Superman wears to get along with his daily life. He's not Batman. Batman is Bruce Wayne, right?
Right.
So Bruce Wayne has to go put on a suit to become Batman, but Superman is standing there dressed up as Clark Kent and is Superman. And there's a certain level of confidence and swagger and probably pheromones that are attached to that. And you just you I don't see a woman encountering that level of moxie. And that's something I brought up before the show, that Iron Man also depicts. You can take away all of the stuff that makes Tony Stark, and he would still walk with that swagger, even without all his money, without all his suits and everything, because he has accomplished all of his goals that he has set out to do. He's traveled to other dimensions, traveled in time, he's gone to alter space, he saved the world 24 times. What have you done recently, you prick? You know, and Superman kind of has that same energy going on when he enters a space. He dominates it, whether he's in costume or not.
And you know what other thought kept occurring to me as I was watching the new movie? Aside from the fact that Superman's suit does not have a collar. I'm sorry, God, that's so freaking annoying that they put a collar on the suit. And it wasn't just me, because my son kept calling him quarter zip Superman. So I felt vindicated when he did that. But I don't think it is actually possible to make a good Superman movie here in the 2020s, because I don't think it's possible to make a good Superman movie where you're not mostly playing it straight. But this entire genre of superhero films it has so long since crossed into self-parody and jumping the shark that it always has to be meta pop culture references, quippy dialogue, we're smile and a nod and a wink, and we're not taking any of this too seriously. And you can't make a good Superman movie in a world like that. In 1978, you still could, because in 1978 you are still able to shoot those the first, almost the entire first half of the movie we spend in Smallville, and we shoot all of the scenes in very soft focus, and you shoot in soft focus because you are trying to elicit a feeling of nostalgia and longing for a bygone past, and you cast an actor like Glenn Ford as Jonathan Kent. And none of us realized this when we were watching that movie as little kids, but when you watch it as an adult, especially for myself now, having spent the last few years trying to familiarize myself with the great old movies of the 40s and 50s and 60s and so on, you know that Glenn Ford had a very specific niche that he filled as an actor. He was in a lot of westerns and war movies. He was the very fundamentally decent American everyman who finds himself thrust into spectacular or dangerous situations and managing to find his way through his fundamental decency. And that makes him an outstanding counterpoint for Marlon Brando's Jor-El. Marlon Brando's Jor-El, who was never supposed to be played with a British accent, but Brando showed up and said, I'm playing him with a British accent. You want Brando or don't you? I'm going to say Krypton instead of Krypton. You want Brando or not? Brando was like that. But yeah, it's the desire to, and they spend so much time in that movie just evoking that, big, spectacular, widescreen shots of the Kansas prairie, just making you fall in love with this location and the people in it. And that forms a lot of the foundation for why you care about what happens to these characters in the second half of the movie. And I don't think modern filmmakers understand that at all. I often get the feeling, watching movies made in the present day, that the people making them have never seen a movie that was made before 2004.
And maybe they haven't.
And maybe they haven't.
And that is the sadness of American movies, because and the thing is they come up with half-baked concepts that they think are revolutionary and over the top, that was done 20 years ago in a much better picture for much less money. And it was done to completely, fully cooked and done and appropriate. A lot of the suspense stuff, like I went on a Final Destination marathon this weekend for no apparent reason. I just woke up, was like, oh, look, they're all in a row. And I watched like half of them at a go. And compare that to your average Alfred Hitchcock film. And these reach a level of suspense that becomes cringe, as opposed to a level of suspense that is, quite frankly, terrifying. You know, when you're sitting
and it is a suspense that is built psychologically, not by what we are shown, but by what we are not shown, not by what is said, but by what is not said. And that's what made Hitchcock a genius. And nobody can do that today.
By having you know that there's a monster in the house, but never showing a monster and never portraying a monster.
And never saying the word monster.
Yeah, never saying the word monster. Anyway, back to Superman. I'm sorry, I digressed on that, but I was just getting at the point of the difference in filmmaking today, and even back during the Final Destination sequence. It, like you said, it's big action scene, some connective tissue to big action scene to plot necessity to big action scene to MacGuffin scene to big action scene to third act big action scene, and we're done. And that's a movie, and that's not a movie. That's a series of self-promotional skits.
No, and even to go back to the example of the 1978 Superman, even the less favorable reviews that picture got, nobody said it was because there wasn't enough action. And they're really, by today's standards, there is hardly any action in that movie. We are halfway into the second act. The movie is 50% over before Superman ever does a Superman thing. And it's where he saves Lois Lane from the helicopter falling down the side of the building and that whole scene. And
I want to push back on you a little bit on one point. And this is Christopher Reeve's depiction of Superman versus Clark Kent. He's the only one I've seen make the effort to make a distinguished personality difference between the two. Whereas whereas Superman is always like the most alpha, top dog alpha in the freaking room. Like, he's freaking Superman, bro. He's the Chad that all other Chads aspire to pretend to be. Clark Kent is completely the opposite. He's your liberal soy boy feminist side piece that's always friend zoned and is never
doesn't want to offend anybody.
Yeah, he's so politically correct that even the chicks get tired of him being around. But at the same time, and this is something that's always boggled my brain, the man is an absolute 10, right? He's 6'2", dark-haired, blue-eyed, perfect skin, built like a brick shit house. Obviously, he spends a couple hours in the gym every week, but none of these chicks ever see it happen, and none of them ever think about him as a strong man.
Yeah, and you really have to work overtime as an actor to be 6'4", 225 and portray yourself as being someone that women don't notice.
Coward, right? That's basically the way he went. He went with coward, but at the same time, there was that Chevy Chase flavor mixed in and this total klutz atmosphere going on, and he always kind of said the wrong thing, and that was such an in-depth performance into the dichotomy between Clark Kent and Superman that I always loved it. And I always hated the fact that when you go to any of the other actors after that, they put almost no effort into being Clark Kent at all. They just Superman with glasses on.
It was a better performance from a better actor than any superhero movie could ever warrant. And which is the highest compliment I can pay to Chris Reeve.
I can't argue with it. It's such, and I've been actually kind of chewed out by some friends because when they bring up, what's your favorite superhero performance, and I say Christopher Reeves as Clark Kent, because no one else, other short of like Ryan Reynolds, like him as Deadpool, that's as much effort. I would give him that. Ryan Reynolds put in just as much effort to be Deadpool as Christopher Reeves to be Clark Kent, because he nailed Superman.
And that's exactly why I wanted to give special mention to that scene in the Niagara Falls honeymoon hotel, where he's just been exposed as Superman. And I just watched it this morning, and in none of my previous viewings of the movie, I don't think I've ever noticed it to the extent that I should have. But just in the act of turning around and taking off the glasses and starting to speak in a different voice, he goes from Clark Kent to being Superman in a completely palpable way. And it's a different facial expression, it's a different body posture, it's a different voice, it's every single different thing that you can change about a character, and he does it like that. And God, what a brilliant actor that man was.
That scene, Jesus.
Are they coming for you?
I hope not. That scene, when you watch that transformation take place, it is one of the big red flags in the movie that you're dealing with a better than average actor, because the human nature thing to do in that situation, when your secret has been blown and there's nothing you can do, you do a big heaving sigh. All right, so here's what's going on. But that's not what happens with this scene.
And that would be the easy thing that would be the easy way to play it as an actor, but he does it the hard way.
He breathes in really deep and basically fills up his suit and becomes Superman. Instead of doing a sigh, he heaves a breath in, turns and looks at her, and suddenly it's obvious this isn't Clark Kent.
Yeah.
How could anyone have ever made that mistake? It's crazy.
I mean, yeah, there's been a physical transformation when all the man did is take off his glasses and
stand up straight.
Yeah, and it almost, but not quite, makes it believable that you could actually not know Clark Kent was Superman. Like that's how well he plays that moment as an actor, and it's just astounding. And
when you go into go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
When you go into the background of Clark Kent and all of, every scene that ever shows anything in the Kent home, there's always this shelf over there that's full of trophies and stuff. And if you pay attention to the trophies, up until about 4th grade, it's always first place. At 4th grade, it's second and third, and rotates back and forth. And this implies, this is one of those things that shows the restraint of Superman, that he was willing to go and play and compete with humans up to a point, right? But he wasn't willing, or so there was a conversation between old Grandpa Kent and Clark about how, these people are actually athletes and they're pushing the envelope, so maybe don't just go out and beat them just outright. You've got to give them something to work for. Everybody needs a purpose, and this is theirs kind of conversation. And there's this obvious change from I am the best. Yes, we know, Clark, we know you're the best, but you're not human. You being the best out of 15 random kids from a town in Iowa means nothing.
That's why you're the water boy and not playing on the team.
Right. And that's the thing is the trophies and everything stop at about middle school. Like he completely withdraws and becomes the journalist, in the band, it goes from trying to portray as a jock where expectations were placed upon him to being a total klutz and just not ascribing to any of that stuff at all. What's up, Sam?
But it says so much also, I think, that it would be the easy thing to just for him to well, I have all these amazing powers and abilities, so obviously I can't play for the football team, so I'm just going to have absolutely nothing to do with athletics while I'm in high school. But he actually goes and serves as the water boy with all of the abuse and hazing that gets heaped on him in that role. And that's part of what makes him an American archetype, I think.
Right.
His willingness to he still wants to be part of the team. He knows he can't be on the team, but I'm just going to be the water boy.
No,
And
no. He knows it would be unfair for him to be on
yes,
that team.
yeah,
And so rather than being on the team, he still wants to support the team because this is the team that accepted him. These are the same students that, even though he's weird, he's off-putting, he probably smells wrong.
and this is the team that represents my town, so I want to help them out in any way that's appropriate for me to help. So I will be the water boy.
Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But the level of humility brought by Superman's archetype is staggering. The differences that we've been explaining about these movies comes down to that archetype. The 2025 movie does not depict an unassailable Ubermensch of a Superman, right? This is a very broken and flawed individual who has established his entire life's work on a figment, a promise that didn't exist, not to make people better, but to come here and have a harem and reproduce a population of Krypton and rule strongly, son, with a big fist in the air.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the Ubermensch, because that reminds me of the other aspect that I meant to mention about the foundational aspects of the Superman mythos, because he is not only an American Jesus metaphor designed to evoke the values of the American turn of the 20th century heartland, but he is also, think about when he makes his first national appearance in DC Comics. It's the spring of 1938. The National Socialists have been in power in Germany for about 5 years now. They have just swallowed up Austria. They're about to swallow up Czechoslovakia. It looks more and more like there's going to be a second world war, probably sooner than later. And this story and this character also functions as an American archetype that stands against the Nietzschean conception of the Teutonic Ubermensch, which of course the National Socialists were leaning into really heavily and saying, because we are such exceptional people, then we have the inherent right to be the hegemon of Europe. And I don't think either Jerry Siegel or Joe Shuster ever explicitly acknowledged that was one of the things that they intended to portray with the character. But even if it was unintentional, I think it has to be acknowledged.
Well, Superman's always been depicted as something of a darker shade than the Ubermensch concept. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan, Superman was a totally different thing from the comic book Superman. And that's shown in every aspect of what he is. The dark hair, the slightly swarthy complexion. He was obviously not the child of these people that raised him. No
Right.
one would ever make that mistake. So clearly it must have been like a great uncle or something like that, because they didn't have any children, did they?
Can't we just keep him? We'll say he's my cousin's baby.
Right. Basically, that's kind of how it went down. And back then, that was a possibility. You could do that.
Yeah, you actually could do things like that back then, amazingly enough.
I mean, is it that amazing? I mean, you could have told these fruit balls that you found him floating down the river, and they'd have been like, well, shucks, lucky you.
And you know what? A
something
lot of
happen
kids
ball."
wound up with perfectly good upbringings that way, even though it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily on the level.
Right. There's and I'm not going to name any names, but there's a bit of a history of sisters raising children because the mothers weren't in a position to be able to. And so
Right.
sisters end up raising them as a daughter just
Yeah,
because the story matches better, the ages are arranged better or whatever. Hey, Tiff.
I've got one of those stories from my own family, but we don't have time to tell it. Am I doing the thing?
Do the thing, dude. You could do it.
All right.
Got
Ladies
that
and
thing.
gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius this evening. Thank you to Scotty Waddles and Kissy May for your super chats before we even started saying anything. That sure was nice of you. I hope we have earned it in the subsequent 90 minutes or so that we've been talking and bloviating and talking about superhero type stuff. And anyway, we will be back here a week from today, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, for your next sojourn through the Blast Radius. And we hope you all have a fantastic tomorrow and an edifying day after that, and just a wonderful week in between. We will see you then. Until then, get off my lawn.